Welcome to Seeking Alpha, the podcast where we're diving deep into crypto, careers, and the chaos of modern dating. I'm Larissa Bunziak.
And I'm Lindsay Poss. Together, we're two women who somehow found themselves at the intersection of crypto Twitter, Silicon Valley, and Tinder. Apparently not for Larissa, though, who does not use Tinder. I learned that yesterday.
Bumble and Hinge are not much better, so maybe I should start.
I was going to say, you got to get on Tinder. It's, best stories, best and worst stories from Tinder.
Okay.
Anyways, so I have been kind of obsessed with this Chris Dixon book. For reference, Chris Dixon is, it was a really early crypto investor at A16Z.
I think he started their crypto practice.
He's kind of like the godfather of
OG.
Crypto VC specifically.
Yeah.
So very
Sponsor us,
successful.
Chris Dixon.
Yeah, Chris Dixon.
Lindsay, is he married? Hopefully.
Yes. But anyway, so a lot of the Chris Dixon book, which is called Read, Write, Own. Have you read it actually?
Not yet.
Okay, I have 4 copies somehow. I kept going to events and they kept giving out free ones. So I am wealthy in Read, Write, Own copies at the moment.
I'll take
Flush
one. Again,
with one.
Chris Dixon, sponsor us.
Yeah. Yeah, send her one, not one of mine. But one of the concepts in the book is called casino versus computer. And it really alludes to what we've kind of been talking about with how we got into crypto, why we're in crypto. And I wanted to spend an episode kind of digging deeper into that. And this is going to be one of those episodes where we're going through kind of more complicated subjects. And so I personally am going to be reading off this bad boy, the little note sheet, quite a bit, more so than in past episodes. The casino part of crypto is what we've definitely talked about in the past. It's the meme coins, it's the trading, it's the people who are looking to like get rich quick, when Lambo, like all of the kind of stuff that gets covered in the news part of crypto. And then there's this other part called the computer part. And I totally stole this from Read, Write, Own, just so you all know. But the computer side is that infrastructure part, that rethinking how our world works, rethinking how we interact with data, all of that stuff, where there's actually like truly massive potential for crypto to change that. So we're going to talk about that today. Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Are you sure? It's going to be a lot of me talking at you.
And if Lindsay's reading her notes, you know that I fucking am reading that word for word. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, do you actually want to talk about the casino part? I feel like this is a little bit more you, like the bad boy part, investing, the bros.
I actually want to talk about the blockchain infrastructure part.
Oh, hell yeah.
Start with the bad boys.
Yeah, let's start with the bad boys. Well, and I think this part's going to be a lot more familiar to a lot of people listening. Like whether you're involved with crypto or not, you definitely know this type for sure. Like this type is all over the news. This is the Sam Bankman-Fried, like I want to pay thousands of dollars to hang out with Tom Brady and like play League of Legends in Anna Wintour's office, like have like a massive trial, be stuck at Rikers Island with Diddy, that kind of thing. So like this is like the part where we for sure see all of the get rich quick stuff. Do you actually know anyone who got rich quick during?
Yes.
You do?
I mentioned it last episode. Yeah, he wooed me with his stories of investing in Ethereum at
$8 to $8,000.
$8.
I remember that, but I didn't realize that was like, do you know anyone else though?
I do, but like very random instances that I've come across and people who are very humble and use their money generally responsibly, like invest a lot of it back. But yeah, I mean, it's all wild stories. Like this kid I used to work with, he was 15 years old in high school and got into Doge.
No way.
Because he was like a little, I guess, outcasty, like not one of the popular kids. And he invested, I don't know how much in Doge, but actually started like a Doge club at his high school and was like maybe one of the only ones, but then became like a mega millionaire because he's now, I don't know, in his mid-20s maybe. And that had to be like, 10 years ago if Doge has been around that long?
It's such a small fraction of the value that it is now.
Sure. Yeah. Even though it's worth nothing still, it was worth like so much less then.
Right.
And so his net worth has gone up like astronomically. Yeah. And now he runs this really cool company.
Good for him.
Yeah.
There's like 2 threads there. The first, I just read an article, which we can totally link in the show notes, about how some people are using Doge for remittances, actually. Like
Why?
Doge is getting like, I don't know. I need to read it. I pulled it up to save it to read it later, and we'll include it in the show notes. But it was something like Elon Musk and Mark Cuban know that Doge is the currency of the future. And if you remember during the Doge boom, I remember this episode very specifically of The Daily, the New York Times Daily podcast, where they interviewed someone who had become a Doge like mega millionaire. And he actually wound up not selling a lot of his stuff off. I mean, he had like 2,500x or something. Like he made an insane amount of profit.
And he didn't sell.
He didn't sell most of it. He
Why?
was like, this is the currency of the future.
Oh my God.
I know.
That hurts. That hurts.
That one hurt at the time. I'm like, bro, like he had done leverage trading too. So he had borrowed money and stuff. And I was like, I think no joke, he had put in something like, if I remember correctly, he put in something like somewhere between 250 and 500K, and it was up to like 2.5 to 3 million. And he was like, no, I'm going to hold. And like, I want to say like over half of that was leverage trading, which for those people out there, leverage trading is when you borrow extra money against the money that you're putting into a trade to like multiply the trade. So like if I have a $10 trade, but I leverage trade it 3 times, then I'm actually like borrowing $30 from someone else to additionally put into the trade. So it's someone else's money. You're multiplying your own money with someone else's money is a leverage trade. Yeah. And I was like, you need to sell. Also, if my math is wrong on that, don't come after me.
Is your math ever wrong?
So, leverage trading and carry trading is like, I don't know exactly how to calculate that kind of thing yet.
Okay.
Is more so like my issue.
Yeah. Is that your next class in
I'm
day
working.
trading?
Yeah, I am.
I
am taking a day
getting
trading
the
class.
full scoop of day trading via Lindsay for $0.
Truly shout out to my teachers on that. And yes, I am becoming completely insufferable.
Okay. So the worst part about Doge is that not even that it's worth next to nothing, but the tech is not being iterated on. Like the
That's
code
true.
hasn't been updated in how many years? Like it's not getting any better. The founders don't give a fuck about it anymore. And like the only people
They
who
started
haven't
as a
moved on
joke.
are like these crazy Doge people. But anyway, moving on.
Well, actually, that's kind of a good microcosm, though, of this side of crypto to me.
Yeah.
Is exactly that. It's like you have like these diehard fans, these people who are going to like hodl no matter what, which is crypto slang for hold. And like these people who are rabid, intensely on the trading side and on the like, we're like to the moon, like create like anyone who knows the GameStop story. Like imagine those folks.
Yeah.
And they're in crypto.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is definitely the casino side for sure. Like, and I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, but that one totally dominates the news, like in ways that is so frustrating.
Yeah, because the news loves to FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And why tell the good parts of crypto when people are going to click on the bad parts and the entertaining and awful, fucking stupid as shit parts?
Yeah, exactly.
Which perhaps leads us into some of the good parts. So
say more things.
Yeah, special thing about blockchain is that it is immutable, decentralized, and transparent. And so think about all of the ways that the world can benefit from a digital, immutable, and transparent ledger. There's like no limit to how many ways the world can benefit from it. And just to give one example that has nothing to do with crypto is identity or medical records. So an example that I like to give people is when the intense wave of migration started and the border security was really cracking down and children were in cages. And think of just like the average children in the US. Like there are kids with terrible medical problems. There are kids with asthma. There are kids with epilepsy. There are kids who are sick, suffering. And these kids were coming with their families trying to have better lives, trying to have access to better medical care. And then all of a sudden they're ripped from their families and put into cages. And there's no system that informs the people who are taking care of them as to what is going on with them medically. So had a blockchain existed for their medical records, the people who are overseeing the health and well-being of these children could have known how to properly care for them. Instead, kids were dying left and right because nobody knew anything about them and their names, identities weren't even verifiable. And that's the part of the beauty of blockchain is that it makes all information verifiable. And so people might say, but why would I want something recorded like that? I don't want people having that type of information. I don't want that type of information accessible about me. It already is. Like, what do you think the U.S. healthcare system is doing? The hospital networks aren't any better than that. They're actually much worse because they're hackable. They're less secure.
Well, and they're privatized as well.
Yes.
So it's not like it's not even necessarily secured by like the government that we all trust and put our trust and faith into.
Yeah, exactly. And you might think that because of HIPAA, your information is safe. It's not, because there's people still accessing it. There's obviously always bad actors in anything that's controlled by humans. And there's no reason to believe that your data, your medical data, won't be sold.
Right.
And
right. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Like raise your hand if you've had your data hacked in any way. Like all of us should put our hands up.
Wouldn't you rather that data be secured by technology and software rather than people?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think first of all, I was not expecting your first example to be like immigrant children with medical issues. Like that's an incredible, like I think the reason why I both like and dislike that is because it's a very niche population. But I will say like the broader stories that like we tell as an industry sometimes get lost. So for example, like saying that you can create a medical passport that holds all your records and information, which again, for me, like I actually just ran into this issue. I was born with a heart defect and recently went to get it checked for the first time in like 10 years, which
Lindsay.
Everything's fine. I know. Everything's fine. It's okay. But
who's going to be my podcast host? No, I'm kidding.
Like
Matt will have to dye his hair blonde.
Shout out to our producer, Matt. He's going to go ahead and step in when my heart gives out. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding.
Matt could never recreate your personality.
Okay, we're getting off track. I'm fine. No, I really am okay. But obviously this started when I was born and the records from that office were paper and very old. And so they actually couldn't kind of look and see comparatively how I'd been doing. And I had various checkups, particularly through my teen years. But what was interesting is, we did an EKG and all this stuff. And she's like, we don't have a baseline. We have no idea what your previous, and I've had EKGs several times in my life. She's like, we have no idea what your previous ones were like. There's nothing we can compare it to. Like we can call and try to get the paper records faxed over. But so for me, like imagining like, being able to store all of that in a non-custodial wallet, which again, non-custodial is like a more technical, complicated term, but it's essentially a wallet that lives with me rather than with a centralized server from a private company, the way health records are stored now, something that I own and have access to. And that actually can be pseudonymous, as you pointed out, or like there's some other privacy mechanisms where that doesn't necessarily the information within the wallet does not have to be shared, would have been so much easier. And so like moving forward, like those kinds of like medical passports or applications where you can safely store your own data are like such huge applications. I actually always use a simpler example, which is there's this company in Ohio that's been doing car titles on chain for a really long time. So I talk about something like a car title, getting it switched over is like a very laborious and bureaucratic process. Yeah. Whereas, again, you can put it on chain. There are inherent characteristics of distributed ledger technology that mean, like you said, that record can never be changed. It can only be transferred by a verifiable transaction. So it's not like, with paper titles, you can't corrupt it in some way or change it or whatever. You can't hack into it if it's digital. Like there's no way of changing it unless an actual transaction, a verifiable transaction takes place. So sending it from one owner to another. And all of those transactions happen instantly. And so with something like a car title, it makes it so much, in order to buy a car and get verified that you bought that car, it's a couple clicks. Yeah. Instead of the process that we have now, which is I have truly had to like fax things and use these hugely outdated methods. And so I think like it's so difficult to envision, but the transmission of data across different places and in what we call transactions, because I think a lot of people think of transactions only as monetary, but the transmission of data from one source to another and actually being able to change that is, as you've pointed out, is hugely, like there's so much potential within that. It's hugely world changing. Yeah. So that's why the computer part is so exciting.
Okay, let's talk about decentralization because it's something that we've brought up a couple of times and might not be familiar for all of our wonderful listeners.
Yes. So decentralization is the idea that data isn't stored in one centralized server. And I think it's a little bit hard to imagine, but the size, I recently looked it up, and the size of the Bitcoin network is actually only 500 gigabytes of the ledger itself. So the size of the ledger is 500 gigabytes. And so that can be stored across devices and in several different places. It's a lot smaller. The work that goes into processing a transaction is often very energy intensive, but the size of the network itself and the size of the ledger itself, the thing that actually holds all the transactions, is a lot smaller. Yeah. The point is that the size is such that it can be stored in several different places across nodes within the network, and everyone gets a copy of this. And because everyone gets a copy and it's not in one place, it's way harder to hack.
Yeah.
Not that it can be hacked anyway, because it's secured by cryptography, but as opposed to like a centralized server, it's very easy. I mean, not even just hacking, but like imagine a power outage that takes out
Right.
a centralized server farm. Like
Yeah.
these are all considerations when you have like data stored only in one place.
Yeah.
And so decentralization is the idea that there is a network of people who actually store the same amount of, or the same data, the same ledger across all of these devices, rather than having it in one location. How did I do?
Good.
You think that's a good explanation?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanna dig in a little bit more to like the peer-to-peer part of that too, because what that means is when you have a bunch of nodes across the network that are storing this information, it's a lot faster to send things between those nodes, and it's just, I feel so confident in having read the people that are designing it and designing these systems. They are removing a lot of human element from it and human decision making and human fallibility from it on purpose. And so, yes, these systems are designed by humans, but at the end of the day, it's like it's run by technology. And that is a place where I feel a lot more comfortable than, again, like having Facebook store all of my data and having all of that data storage controlled by Facebook. So they are the ones deciding if they can sell it, and how they use it and all of that stuff. Whereas in a decentralized system, there's completely shared ownership across the whole system of all the data of the transactions and of the network. And so it's like way more kind of like power to the people.
Yeah, exactly. And when you say nodes, the simplest way to think about it is just like a server.
Yeah, like each individual node is its own server. And I do want to talk about, like, I think some of the things that make decentralization so attractive to me are the ways that data is bought and sold in centralized servers. And so I don't know if that's something that like you think about on the regular, or like, you know, we all sign disclosures that say like, I agree to the consent of my impossibly long privacy notices about how our data is being bought and sold.
I mean, one very superficial but fucking annoying example of this is when you go onto websites and click yes to all cookies because it's just like the quickest thing. And then all of a sudden your email is full of spam from all these marketers. And it's because that information was transferred to a centralized system that then sells your data that you agreed to.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, there's a fantastic book by Byron Tao, who was a tech reporter, I think, at the Wall Street Journal for many years. He just wrote a book called, I believe it's called The Surveillance State. Again, we'll link in the show notes. And it was all actually about how ad tech works. And that was really eye-opening for me, because when it comes to responsibility for data storage, it is on the company that collects the data to be very responsible with it. But they are also allowed to sell. And when they do sell, there is less responsibility on those companies that are collecting it.
Right.
And so there's this weird market that's created where one of the entities within the market is responsible for privacy and security, but is allowed to sell it to entities that are not at all responsible for privacy and security. And so it creates this weird system. And this actually just happened. I don't know if you saw, it was something like, I don't know, ridiculous number of social security numbers were hacked, quote unquote. And it was basically with that, there was third-party websites that sold that data to a private company to be able to use that then got hacked. So there's this weird like transitive property to how data is bought and sold that makes it wildly unsecure, I think is a better word in this case, wildly unsecure. And as consumers, like, we just kind of have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no other choice. Like, all of our social security numbers got hacked, and it's like, okay, well, monitor your credit. It's like the only solution. Like, there's nothing that we can do. And so one of the huge draws about distributed ledger technology, about things like non-custodial wallets, about having, you know, a medical passport where my data is stored, or even like a shopping history that I control, or anything, like, for me, like, actually medical data, but also like body and personal data, like having, like, I don't trust period tracking apps, but I would love to use one, but I'll only do that if I can store the data myself. Yeah. And right now that's not an option until someone invents a blockchain version of it. I'm waiting. Yeah. Which maybe I'll do that. Who knows? But anyways, being able to like store my own data and understanding how to be able to use it is like a huge a huge draw to me about blockchain technology.
Definitely. And even if you're somebody who isn't that technologically savvy and
Right.
the control of your own data isn't in your list of priorities, just think of it this way. Like when you go out to the bars and you see all those fuckboys being finance bro fuckboys, like they work at the
That's
firms.
Larissa's type, BTW.
Fuck no. But actually, I don't know. I feel like I'm contradicting myself by saying that from the last episode, but perhaps we'll do a deeper dive on my preferences in men another time. But those are the guys who are having access to your data and have access to sell it.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like I will say, I'm very passionate about tech and these issues. I don't expect people to be as passionate. I expect the services to be better.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about like owning and operating my own data, whatever. What that's going to look like for like the end user experience is a medical passport that I log into and I can see my health history, is a period tracking app that I just use.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily, even with like shopping experiences, it's maybe a platform where I opt in and out of what I want to share and my preferences so that I get great recommendations to me. So it's not necessarily like I expect everyone to like go out there and read a bunch of resources and become privacy hounds the way that like I like to spend my time doing. But I do expect the user experience to change. And I guess the biggest shift for me is I would love to see more people taking an interest in developing and creating that experience.
Yeah.
And more types of people, because we've had like very specific folks. I'm thinking mostly of like social media, and there's actually like where we're recording, there's like pictures of the PayPal mafia right outside. Made me giggle today.
Notice how pixelated that picture is. Yeah, we were like trying to get an interior design. I mean, this room that we're in is designed very nicely. Shouts out, Matt, producer Matt. But
producer Matt.
Except for the lack of bar cart, which is another issue.
No, we did talk about doing an episode drunk. That'll happen at some point.
Yeah, but yeah, we are trying to get an interior designer outside the pod room, Stu.
Outside the stew.
Saying Stu reminds me of this one time I was at like this janky ass, perfectly divey in all the right ways bar, and then there was this guy eating beef stroganoff there.
I don't know how that's related, but the way I know in the stew is I dated an aspiring rapper in high school who used to talk about being in the stew.
Say more.
No.
Okay, fine.
You need to finish your thing first.
We'll do a deep dive another
finish
time.
Your story about the interior designer.
There is no story. Just we fucking need one out there. God, if maybe we record out there, it'll motivate the decision makers to get one.
Yes, the like very winding point is I would love to see not every single end user engaged with how they're thinking about their data. I would love to see more people who are interested in development and creating these tools get in early and create tools that are more secure for that end user. That's like where
that's a really good point, because it's not just about the problems with existing privacy issues and things like that. It's a lot about making the experience for users better.
Definitely.
Like a big concept that's spoken about a lot in crypto and blockchain more widely is like bringing power back to the people, as you said before. Mm-hmm. And one example of that that's possible through blockchain technology is like it's part of owning your own data and things like that, but being able to get more targeted ads, which you said also. Right. But like right now, companies are able to benefit from selling your data and things like that. Mm-hmm. But wouldn't you like to have all your data and be able to sell that to companies so that you can be making the money from it and also get good targeted ads? Like it should be that the people have the power to control the way that their information is used, and it should be used to their benefit, not fucking corporations' benefits.
Yeah, we're going down such a funny path because I previously worked in technology policy. It's kind of how I like got started in crypto. And one of the technologists that I used to love to kind of read and follow the work of, his name is Jaron Lanier. He's an early AR, VR pioneer from like the 80s. He's Microsoft and older. He is one of the early people who use the term data as the new oil to describe how data is the thing that's actually empowering all of these companies now. It's so funny that he actually said that way before ChatGPT too. And large language models took off because they're obviously running into so many issues with, first of all, not having enough data, being able to license the data, not licensing the data and getting in trouble. And so data has all of a sudden become this massively important commodity for how solutions, systems, products are created and run. And yeah, like we don't have a lot of say in how it's used. And I will say, like, this is kind of an internal struggle for me because one of the things that I always think about, I am a technologist. I'm super interested in this stuff. I read a lot of books about it. I spend my free time on it. I read the news. I do all that stuff. Because of that, feel like I'm a little bit more of an informed consumer. I never know how much expectation to actually put on the consumer. So we say things like data is the new oil and all of this stuff. And, people should have control.
We say things like that? Well, technologists.
Well, yeah. Data. Oh, I'm just going to say, we say things like data is the new oil, so people should be able to control where the flow is.
Okay.
That's what we're just talking about.
Yeah, but I've never heard it put that way. I mean, that's cool.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, just owning and controlling your own data is the thing that like we're talking about here.
Oil.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, it's a commodity. But like how much should we expect the average person to understand about all of this?
Right.
If they have to understand, then it like becomes a very complicated world that we live in. And if they don't have to understand, then no progress is ever made and we don't get a system that is actually beneficial to the majority.
Right.
So like that like balance to me is actually like, I think about that all the time. I'm like, truly how much weight is on the individual?
I do not think a lot of weight is on the individual. I think it's on the people who are informed about it, and it's their responsibility to do better and be accountable. And
looking at me saying, this is on you, Linz.
Yeah, because I'm on the other side as like the less technological, less news ready, will not sit on my friend's couch, for example, listening to the Wall Street Journal news or whatever the fuck you were doing last night. But
who, me?
Yeah. I will not do that. I will inform myself on topics that I'm interested in. I will not say that I will go very far out of my way to dive deep into or deep enough into topics that are generally important, but maybe are not so applicable to my day-to-day life or important to me intellectually. I think it is on the people who are informed and who are involved in this work every single day who should be held accountable for making the experience better.
So then in your eyes, which I think I'm way more on that side for sure. Like I don't think it's an individual responsibility. I think it's like actually like one of the farces about society now is that like you need to figure it out. Like no. Like some things should actually be figured out for you and should just work. Like that's the whole point of having like collectives and systems. And
people who are doing the job should like be able to figure out how to do it well.
So I'm definitely more on the like it's not an individual responsibility thing. But how do we like this again? This is like where I get tripped up. Without having an informed public who's pushing for that progress, how do we make the people who are in charge like care about that? There's a couple, I mean, to me, there are a couple avenues. The first is like getting more people, getting the right people to care maybe, or getting more types of people to care is maybe a better.
Yeah.
Where like just more voices that can understand problems and potential issues from different angles is maybe one way. But how else do we kind of deal with the power structure that's in place right now of these people making top-down decisions that impact the individual without having a sense of doing what's best for the individual? Like, how do we do that without making like the public super informed about like, oh my God, these people are making choices for you. Care about it.
I think it's largely a problem of education and more so early education and wider education. I mean, it's like the kids who are growing up in Stanford and around Silicon Valley who are getting this exposure to technology from a very early age and knowing that those career avenues are available and viable pursuit for them. Whereas kids in underdeveloped communities are not exposed to those type of opportunities, and they have different perspectives and have probably had very different interactions with sales of their private data and their parents' private data and things like that, and have been harmed by it in different ways than more privileged people have. And so giving them the knowledge, at least that opportunity exists to be a problem solver in the problems that they've experienced technologically is very important, because right now I do not think that's happening at all.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think like that's where I talk about like kind of getting more voices at the table kind of things, like people who understand the issues from different perspectives or understand different impacts about it. Because to your point earlier, like I truly had never, I mean, obviously I followed stories of migration and children at the border and stuff, but I never thought about like, oh my God, what if one of them does have a medical issue? Like that was not, like, and those kind of niche perspectives can help develop products that are more beneficial to the wider public. So it's not like saying like we're going to develop a product specifically for that population, but it's saying like, oh, we're going to like take into consideration that population's experience and how we can maybe apply that to like safety practices that like expand across like everyone kind of thing. So that does make sense to me. But do you think it's on like companies or governments? Like who is going to be the one that's going to reach into these communities or whose responsibility is it?
I think it's the tech platform creators.
Interesting. I like this because this isn't, I mean, I think like the inclination is always like government, you know? Schools are publicly funded. We're talking about private companies. So we're going to get some heat. So I want to know more.
Yeah. I love the haters. I want them to come to us. Mostly because I want to know that people are listening. Besides myself, because I'm going to be like the first 1,000 listens.
Absolutely. It's playing on loop.
Strictly out of self-absorption.
Oh, I was just going to like put it on a quiet tab and rack up those views.
Fair. Potential advertisers. We're not actually saying this. It's not really us. It's actual people. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Stellar Development Foundation is doing a really good job of that, where they're actually creating the tools for people who are experiencing problems to create solutions for those problems versus having governments or privatized tech companies try and force solutions down their throats or education down their throats. So I did talk about starting early with education and things like that, but I think it's also creating tools for people to use to solve their own problems. You need to meet people where they are in the problems, the ways that they're experiencing certain problems, and then empower them with the tools to be able to solve things for themselves the way that they best see fit. So whether that's development platforms and tools or different ways to own their data and sell their data to advertisers, whichever way is like most pertinent for them, they need to be empowered with the tools and mechanisms for solutions.
Yeah, well, I get that. Oh God, we're getting into like product market fit. As in like let the people who know the market create the product market fit. Anyways, but I want to circle back to our initial concept. I also want to vomit that I just used circle back. Please get me out of corporate America.
I think that's a thing in your 30s. Yeah. It's like
who said I was 30? No, I'm just kidding. I actually love being 30.
Me too.
Yeah, third decade. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to what we initially started at with this idea of the casino versus the computer. And the reason why I want to come back to it is because I want to one more time drive home the message that the ensuing conversation we had, like we spent maybe like 3 minutes talking about the casino part.
Yeah.
And then the next however many talking about like all the potential for this technology and education and rebuilding communities and redeveloping communities. And so I want to put like a finer emphasis on that point because this is a theme throughout all of our episodes so far, that like this is the reason why we're here and why we're building this technology. And I think like having more people talk about this side, while it's not exciting, in some ways, like it's not as exciting as like some meme coin that like I just saw one yesterday that was like a seal that someone went from $1,200 to $8 million in 15 minutes or whatever.
I personally am thrilled and super excited and would be sitting on the edge of my seat if I didn't have to sit this way to look good on the podcast. I think it's exciting. But yeah, perhaps the average
the news cycle and stuff isn't geared towards this kind of story. Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's on people themselves, but I think that media and hype cycles are not geared towards this at all. Yeah. And so I want to put a finer point on like kind of looking outside of the hype cycle, I guess, is what I would suggest to people who are maybe getting more into the crypto space in general. I find it really, really fun to find and follow the stories of the companies and projects that are like doing really fascinating and incredible work. Yeah. And there are so many. There are so many. But so I want to reemphasize that like when it comes to casino versus computer, there is so much happening on the computer side. Way more than on the casino side. Yeah. The casino stuff is just like sexy and like interesting from like a very like basic and media
there's
hype
like
cycle perspective.
The huge shock factor to it always versus like the like that's really interesting and like good for the world factor.
Right, like, you're supporting Afghani refugees who land in South America. Wow. Versus like this guy made $1 million off of $100 in 45 minutes. And you're like, so anyways, I guess like one thing that I hope that we can accomplish here is getting like past the clickbait part. Well, anyways, thank you all so much for joining us on another episode. We're so looking forward to just bringing you these stories, bringing you the folks that are building the things that we're super fascinated by and interested in. I personally can't wait to continue with this project. I think that Larissa and I are going to have some really cool and interesting conversations and just learn about what the heck's going on the computer side in a way that's going to be like way more fun
than you have ever heard before.
Yeah. So make sure follow us on Twitter. Larissa and I are both on Twitter at our full names, which we will link in the show notes. We are very doxxed. Follow the show at Seeking Alpha Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And if any Gen Zer out there wants to create a TikTok for us for free,
we are looking for an intern. Yeah.
We are always looking for a free intern. I love a free intern.
Yeah, who will double as our personal slave.
I was going to say, I want to be clear here that like it's free because we're broke. If I was a wealthy company, I would not do free internships.
Oh, yeah. No, that's like so cruel.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah,
but free internships only if you're broke.
Cannot afford it. Yeah,
we cannot afford it.
We can't afford it.
If you would like to sponsor an intern, also hit us up.
Or more importantly, us. Because I would rather take the money first. But then we would totally give it to an intern if we had extra.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, follow us everywhere. Join us again for another episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.